We talked about the central nervous system. Now we're going to go into the peripheral nervous system, which is everything outside of the brain and the spinal cord. We have cranial nerves that go through openings in the skull. They go to regions of the head and neck. Spinal nerves go to the rest of the body. 31 pairs of nerves we talked about come off of that spinal cord. The cell bodies of cranial and spinal nerves are arranged in clusters called ganglia. There are two parts to the peripheral nervous system, the sensory and the motor division. Just like it sounds, the sensory division transmits impulses from sense organs to the central nervous system. The motor division transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles or the glands. Sensory receptors are cells that transmit information about changes in the internal and external environment. We call those stimuli. Got different sensory receptors that respond to different things. Chemoreceptor responds to chemicals, mouth, nose, and blood vessels. Photoreceptors respond to light. Those are found in the eyes. Mechanoreceptors respond to touch, pressure, vibrations, and stretch. That's skin, hair follicles, ears, ligaments, and tendons. Thermoreceptor, temperature change, found in the skin and hypothalamus. Pain receptors respond to tissue injury, and those are found throughout the body. Sensory receptors transmit impulses to sensory neurons when the threshold is met. And then the sensory neurons send things onto the central nervous system. If you see these flowers, the chemoreceptors in the nose and the mouth will fire, and then photoreceptors based on the visual input. Once it's gathered and processed sensory information, the central nervous system will send commands to the rest of the body. The motor division is responsible for this, sends that information from the central nervous system to the muscles or the glands. These messages are relayed through one of two divisions, the somatic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system, the start of that word somatic is soma, which means body. And that's exactly what it means. It regulates body activities that are under conscious control, such as the movement of skeletal muscles. Most of the time you have control over it, but when your body's in danger, the central nervous system may take over. Voluntary movement uses motor neurons. These impulses originate in the brain, they're carried through the spinal cord, and then they go to the motor neurons. The motor neurons connect with muscles, and they cause muscle contractions that produce voluntary movements. Some of the somatic nervous system has actions that occur automatically. This is called a reflex arc. Imagine stepping on something sharp like a tack with your bare foot. Your leg may recoil before you even know that you did it. This rapid response is called a reflex, and the pathway that information follows is called a reflex arc. So sensory receptors react to the sensation of the tack, send an impulse to the sensory neurons, and they relay information to the spinal cord. Reflex arcs don't go all the way to the brain. The spinal cord deals with those. An interneuron in the spinal cord processes that information and forms a response. That response is sent through a motor neuron to the muscle that it stimulates. That muscle contracts, and the leg retracts away from the tack. While that's happening, information about the injury is sent to the brain. But by the time the brain feels the pain, there's already been movement. Now, while I said that the spinal cord is in charge of all reflexes, or most reflexes, as you know, there are exceptions. Many reflexes that involve structures in your head, such as blinking or sneezing, are controlled by the brain. It's all about the shortest pathway between sensation and response. So that's the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system regulates activities that are not under conscious control. When you start to run, the autonomic nervous system speeds up your heart rate. So you consciously start to run. That's the somatic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system does the things that you don't have to tell your body to do. You don't have to tell your body to speed up your heart rate and blood flow to the skeletal muscles. You don't have to tell your body to sweat, and you don't tell your body to slow down your digestive system. But all of these help your body run faster and farther. There are two different divisions of the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. They have opposite effects on their organs. So, heart rate is increased by sympathetic nervous system, decreased by parasympathetic nervous system. The words I use to associate with these, sympathetic, I'd like you to think about the word stress. So the sympathetic nervous system kicks in times of stress. Parasympathetic nervous system, I'd like you to think of the word peace. So the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in times of peace. So like I said, sympathetic system, key phrase, intense activity. Increase in blood pressure, release of energy-rich sugar into the blood, and shutting down of activities like digestion that aren't related to fight or flight. So sympathetic is fight or flight, response to stress. Oppositely, the parasympathetic system is more of a rest and digest thing. Lowers heart rate and blood pressure, activates digestion, activates pathways that store food molecules in the tissues of the body for whenever they're needed.